Steve here in Sydney on the lay gnosis website truebluehealer.com. I've got something pleasantly surprising about a very important subject at the moment, Gamergate, and the news comes from a most unexpected venue, that is namely the Sydney 6 o'clock news. Can I just tell you, there was a lengthy item on the news about a woman who found a successful solution to the problem of Gamergate violence of men players toward female game players. And it turns out, to my utter surprise, 20% of online gamers are female, and they get more than their share of verbal violence and abuse heaped upon them, including the usual death threats and dismemberment threats and rape threats, you know, blah blah blah, shades of Rebecca Watson. Now, a single lady in Brisbane, an online gamer enthusiast, she came up with a solution. It's proven, tested and working, and she got 77 rape and death threats in the space of a single month, and it piqued her curiosity a bit, and she started looking up their personal profiles, you see. And what she discovered was that they're all underage young men, threatening her with rape and dismemberment, etc., from the privacy of their bedrooms, you see. And none of them are old enough to even leave school yet. So she hit upon a very useful solution, which is kind of laughable in its simplicity, yet it worked with masterful efficiency. And that is, she started looking up their mothers on Facebook, contacting them and conveying their sons' verbal violence and threats against women to their mothers, you see. It had an immediate effect on the behaviour of the gamers. They all suddenly became a lot more civilised, and she even got some written apologies from parents and the boys, you see. Now, this has been so successful, it went around social media. Apparently it's been copied all over the world now. Countries as far as Israel are chattering about it in their social media. Here's how we can finally handle these underage young punk men who want to swag around heaping verbal violence against women, you see. Okay, wonderful story. We've got a proven, tested solution to a near intractable social problem. It is tractable. We can fix it after all, you see. So, now before we go any further, can I just point out that what she's actually discovered, the Brisbane lady, the lone lady who started this movement against online gamers being verbally violent, what did she actually do by dobbing them into their mothers? Well, she corrected the young men's mother deficiency by reinserting a dose of mother into the son's life. The deficiency had been caused by years and years of playing by themselves in a bedroom away from parental supervision. You really can't blame mums and dads for not knowing exactly what Junior's doing at 11 o'clock at night on his computer. Mum and dad have got their own life to lead in the rest of the house. So, anyway, this is surely a component of Rebecca Watson too. The Gamergate thing is connected inextricably with the pseudoskeptic empire collapsing, that sort of thing. But here, once we're seeing parental deficiency being a major factor in outrageous behaviour, unbounded behaviour. Do you remember what Micromedia said in his dissertation about the complete lack of personal boundaries in the behaviour of pseudo-skeptics in JREF, right up to the management? Lack of personal boundaries, and mother deficiency causes a lack of personal boundaries in young men's behaviour toward women. So here we've got an insight into what causes the social phenomenon of let's kill Rebecca Watson and that sort of thing. They need some feedback from mature women about how to deal with women and have their mothers supervise the lesson at home. And can I also add out, I would suspect that although they're not mentioned in this story at all, I suspect some of the fathers would have had something to say also about these rape and dismemberment threats being typed daily out of their son's bedroom. So this very much undermines, once again, the gay lesbian community's idea that anything can raise children. You can have, you know, two dwarfs in a gorilla suit can raise a heterosexual child, no problem, as long as they love the child. That's all that really matters. You can have two, you know, 8-foot raving Marxists joined at the hip. They can raise children as long as they love the child. It's absolutely false. This anything goes thing comes out of the pedophilia wing of the pseudo-skeptic movement. The Rolf Harris wing, the Stephen Fry wing, the BBC wing of the pseudo-skeptic movement. You've seen the links I've found about Stephen Fry. Here, you make up your own decisions there. Join your own dots. You're all very good at that. So I think that's a wonderful answer anyway to the simple matter of... also it underlines the naivety of young men who think they're anonymous and get away with anything. Clearly they're not anonymous. That's another lesson for them, that their victims can contact their mothers and relay the obscenities they're heaping upon stranger women, unknown women on the internet. They can relay it back to their mothers, and it's a remarkable social solution to a hemorrhaging social problem. It might see some... So in this sense, the business of everything being accessible and known and no one having any secrets on the internet has actually worked to the good of people there. It's solved a social problem which it caused in the first place by the faulty perception that you could do injury to other people on the internet and get away with it because you were anonymous. That's a naivety that a lot of young people, young men especially, need to grow out of. And I've just playfully wondered what I would do if I caught my 15-year-old son doing such a thing. Would I put a chainsaw through his computer or what? What would I do? Or would I sit back and be a little more thoughtful? I'm not sure. But I'll leave you with that right now. This is a stunning social victory invented by one woman from Brisbane. The news item told us on the 6 o'clock news. And if you know anyone who's got this problem, by all means tell them, please do. Can I just add one more thing? It's fairly easy to understand the mechanism by which young men are going off the rails playing video games. I've never played a game myself. As far as I can tell, most of them are about kill or be killed, shoot the other person first before they get you. You win points this way. And what are you actually doing? Well, you're actually learning to kill people in an utterly dispassionate way. Although it's a game, but you are training your brain hundreds of times a night with kill shots, aren't you? And what are you actually doing? You're training your brain to be totally unbounded, not to have the slightest hesitation about shooting something. So it's unbounded behaviour which is affecting the brain development of young men, and they take this unbounded behaviour onto the internet, and they do the same thing with women socially. It's kind of obvious, isn't it, when you think about it? That a game is an artificial situation, and you can't have totally unbounded behaviour in social situations. If I can just think about it, go through like a thought experiment of what gamers are actually doing for hundreds of hours while their brains are being developed. They're putting their brain through practice sessions of, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe this gamer's watching here, but hundreds of retaliatory anger spikes, where it's important to get your anger spike in first to win the game. That's basically what these games are about. I know it's all based on our primitive hunter-gatherer abilities, throwing stones and spears and all that, and arrows and stuff, but when you train your brain to do nothing else but continuously do retaliatory anger spikes over and over again, it's got to change your outlook, hasn't it? It's got to change your attitude toward things. And we now know this changes development of the physical brain in brain scanners, so it's beyond dispute, really. But it might also explain why they can't be disagreed with. because it's basically about me overcoming you, getting the first kill shot in with a spike of anger. It seems to be a conditioning thing that games are doing to too many young men, and it's causing a social disaster on the internet. They don't seem to grow out of it either. Maybe some people can advise me on that, who've watched young men over the years. Do they grow out of it by the time they're 25? For example, impulse control doesn't occur in the average man's brain until about 26. It's one of the last things to develop in the physical brain. So maybe we could have some explanations from gamers on this. I'll leave it with you guys. And so it's well established that you can't disagree with a lot of young men gamers. They can't stand anyone disagreeing with them. That's surely another boundary that's never formed, that people should be allowed to disagree with you, and you can coexist with a person disagreeing with you. Basically, you've got to punish them with a kill shot, basically, which is a spike of verbal violence that we meet over and over again in angry young gamers stalking each other. Seems excessive online gaming warps the personality of some young people. This is a good subject, isn't it? How interesting. On the playlist link, I've added a little video there. It's a Gamergate thing. It gives you a good summary of the feelings in the industry, certainly by one person, and it's got a whole lot of angry people underneath it complaining about the gaming industry, that sort of thing. And it's certainly a good talking point. It's out of date already. Some people under the video say, hey, it's a month old, this video, and you've completely missed all the sex scandals in the Gamergate ongoing saga, you see. I would say this is a slow growing up process, this protesting against corruption and sex scandals in an industry which is just out to sell things, like so many other industries. Most of our civilization is built around selling things. They use stealth selling, they use corruption, they use bribery to sell things. Don't these young men know this yet? Do they still believe in the purity of Cinderella and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and everyone should be pure? It's not really like that at all. And the older you get, the more you laugh at the naivety of young people. And there's complaints about feminists writing a lot of the game reviews and things, and using it as a way to attack young men generally, their behaviours, etc. I'll tell you, this has been done before to society at large. My own personal experience happened in about 1966. I was astonished. I was about 13, 14, and suddenly the newspapers, the media, the radio, everyone was talking about feminism. Suddenly, virtually overnight, it happened. And it seemed, we thought, because we had an Australian pseudo-intellectual called Germaine Greer. She wrote this book called The Female Eunuch, which I didn't like, by the way, because it was just, she didn't like boys, basically. They weren't as marvellous as they should be, seemed to be her big complaint. And mercifully, she ended up in England boring people to death in the UK on their talk shows, and having launched endless diatribes against women, against men as you were, and saying that everything they did was sexist and women were oppressed by needing to wear lipstick and bras and all that stuff, burning bras and all that crap, you know. Decades later on English TV, she now wears lipstick because she looks better. She puts her best foot forward, trying to look as good as she can, which is common sense, which never occurred to her until she was in her 60s or something. And now she regrets never having had a baby. Oh, golly, what a complete turnaround. So was she just very slow, very, very slow growing up? She came from Moonee Ponds in Melbourne, and I'm glad she left the country, actually, because I do remember when feminism was introduced in the Australian media, it was very disconcerting and confusing, because they were all talking about women being oppressed by men, blah, blah, blah. And it's true, they were to some degree. But there's a problem with that. Men are equally oppressed. They have roles they have to do, things that are expected of them, and women seem to want it both ways. Well, the feminist movement wanted it both ways. Can we put it that way? Or the controllers of society who had launched this stuff in the newspapers wanted to confuse men and women and set them at war with each other. Now that was deliberately done in 1966, and I didn't know at the time, because I was still very naive. I thought a newspaper was a newspaper supposed to be presenting news. It wasn't until years later it was pointed out to me that really they're advertisement papers to sell advertisements, and the news articles are only put there to make you read the ads, you see. So I was a bit naive at 13, 14, forgive me, right? And many of the complaints I see from these young gamers are just that sort of naivety, that everything should be fairy tale purity, Cinderella, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and they're shocked and horrified that now there's a sex scandal in the gamer industry. Can you believe it? Oh, goodness gracious. I suggest they read stuff like Helen of Troy, get some idea, Victorian literature, and how corruption is really one of the dominant forces and can be depended on always to exist. That it's something that young people have to get accustomed to. It's all part of the growing up process, and you don't finish growing up, you don't get political awareness till you're in your late 20s. Did you know that? For the average person, that's known in psychological studies. There's a grave suspicion that the gamer industry has been targeted by feminist agitators who sort of infiltrated and set up all these blog review things on games, and it's probably true, I would say, because I discovered many years later, after noticing feminism was suddenly introduced into worldwide literature, that the Rockefellers claimed credit for doing just that. Feminism began in a magazine called MS, and it was a monthly diatribe against men. CIA-funded, CIA-seeded magazine, right? It took off, it was copied all around the Rockefeller media, all around the world. Print media especially is controlled entirely by the Rockefellers, which is the Standard Oil Company, controlling Big Pharma and every bloody thing else. Now, what was the Rockefellers' reasoning behind introducing feminism in the early to mid-60s? Basically, women weren't paying tax. A significant portion of the workforce wasn't working and wasn't paying tax. So why should they escape enslavement? That was basically the reason. I found that on YouTube many decades later, you see. An interesting little aside, I asked my sister about it. She went to university a few years later, and she said, oh, the feminists, she said, they are the ones that wear chaff bags and have long hairy underarms and never brush their hair and don't wear lipstick, and they attack men all the time saying they're being oppressed. Well, men didn't rush toward them. Men didn't want to be with them. My sister said that she noticed that in her philosophy class. In fact, they occupied entire classrooms wearing their chaff bags as a protest against a male-dominated society. And she said they all seemed to prefer each other's company. She was a bit naive herself. She didn't know much about lesbians at the time. But some of them definitely showed those sorts of tendencies. So, if feminism's been reinserted into the gaming industry, I can't figure out why you would do this. It's more social engineering, almost certainly. And I can only suggest that it's probably to raise the anger in men to make them more governable. Because the more governable, the more angry they are, the more they respond to dog whistle politics and simple keywording, because they're so much easier to polarise with keywords. I can't really see who's behind it. But I'll just tell you this, feminism is one of the arms of communism, which was introduced by the Bolsheviks in 1917. And it's really to set women against men again. It was done in 1917 in Russia, and to make the population more governable again, because the Tsarist regime was heavily entrenched in family values, and the Bolsheviks wanted to smash family values. So feminism was introduced in 1917, and it was a roaring success. It did shake the Tsarist establishment to its foundations. It did ruin family life in Russia so much that none other than Mikhail Gorbachev said after the collapse of the Soviet Empire that the mistake the Bolsheviks made was leaving feminism running all that time. They forgot to turn it off because it seriously eroded Russian society and contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Empire. Okay, so if you're seeing it today here in Gamergate, feminism is one of the streams, the rivulets, the tributaries that communism seems to have collapsed into. Another one is political correctness. Another one is the international movement to get rid of national boundaries. The Green Party, who seem to be raving internationalists, raving socialists, wanting to redistribute wealth from rich countries to poor countries, etc. That just seems to be that communism has just morphed into 5 different streams of existence rather than being one big monolithic block that we thought we had only in Russia and the Eastern Bloc countries. So I'll put a playlist link here at the end for you. You can get the flavour of the month on the Gamergate, and so we're all on the same page, so to speak. But they already, the uploader acknowledges it's already out of date, but it still gives you a good idea of where they're going and the anger in the people involved underneath the video, and the anger in the speaker on the video, that we're not all a bunch of virgins, that sort of thing. Well, and I'll bring you back to, as a response to that, the fact that the Brisbane woman, the unique method she found of shaming them into silence and better behaviour, establishing a boundary in young men's aggro behaviour toward women. So this is where all the complaints are coming from. It might be a small group of angry young men, dysfunctional psychopathic young men, and then maybe there is a great silent majority in the gaming industry that we never hear from. Well, if you're silent, you get walked over, and small minority groups will always weave and bob around you and get the headlines and get society's attention and get laws and rules changed. Which brings me to another headline last night. Australian Federal Parliament is introducing more legislation to control trolls. It's a growing social menace of assault and battery done verbally, and people committing suicide. So it's in our federal parliament again. This is a couple of days after the Brisbane lady is heroised for shaming young men into better behaviour. So the great silent majority can just be ignored if they exist, and I'm sceptical. But maybe someone who's more informed on this could tell us about this, explain it. So here's the video at the end for you.